Oh, sorry, we're live.
Hey, live from the power of the internet, it's the Retro Reload podcast featuring a man in a hockey mask and a t-shirt, a man with an enormously large red beard, and a skinny guy in a fedora. Now, your host, Dash V.
Thank you for that intro, but technically this is a newsboy, not a fedora.
Oh! No!
Warded again, curse you!
Right?
So, yes, folks, this is in fact Retro Reload. We apologize that we don't have any of the titles down in the lower third there. Google Hangout appears to be having some issues, which may or may not be related to the rigging of the election. So I'm sure Russia is going to help us look into this, maybe uncover some emails that indicate what happened to our lower third. Until such time, though, you'll just have to remember us by our charmingly, dashingly good looks. So we got a couple of news topics for you today. I think the first one that we're going to kick off with is going to be about the Sega Genesis. Possible return. But before we get to that, you might have already noticed we do, in fact, have a return guest.
Woo!
Jeremy, why don't you go ahead and introduce our return guest?
I'm sure you remember our fabulous guest. He was Clay Matthews last time, but now this time he played for the Blackhawks, Troy. Troy, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. This is Troy. Some people know me as Trojan from the GB LAN and the King of 94 Wisconsin community. We're based in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and we recently held a NHL 94 tournament for the same system, the Sega Genesis, that you guys are going to talk about later today.
Excellent.
So this tournament was last week, right?
No, actually, that last weekend I was involved in a Tecmo Super Bowl tournament.
Oh, that's right.
The tournament for our King of 94 actually happened in September the 24th.
Oh, okay.
And
you want to shout out the trophy real quick?
Yeah. So players competed for Lord Manley's Cup, and I just wanted to clarify, I was not the winner. It is sizable. It's about 16 pounds. There is engraving on it. I don't know if it's going to show up on the camera, but it's handcrafted. The top of the trophy is a mixing bowl that you can buy from Walmart, and it was welded into folded sheet metal, and that rest of it is machined. But it was added a nice little touch to our tournament.
That's pretty nice.
Thank you. I'll pass it along. A guy by the name of Charlie. He goes by Charlie Bravo in our gaming community. Went to task for us on that. We had a couple revisions, and he got it to us the night before. That's how much attention and detail went into it.
Nice.
So we took it, instead of Lord Stanley's Cup, it was Lord Manley's Cup, and there are I don't know if it showed up on the camera shot, but there are rivets all over. It kind of gives it this really aggressive look to it. Yeah,
that's excellent detail work. I love it.
So you want to go over the tournament and how it went?
Oh, it went really well. We had a setup period a couple days before we started bringing some equipment up there. They didn't have any. Our venue, Townline Pub and Grill, had no guests using that space, so they let us bring our TVs and such, and we started setting up the night before. We had two out-of-towners come in. One was Angry Jay from California. He was the ultimate tournament winner. And then we had Kevin Cavarello, who is a big name in the retro community, especially Tecmo Bowl. He runs the Tupa Bowl out in Columbus, Ohio. He drove all the way up, and he had an adventure to get to our event. He's driving for a number of hours, has a breakdown, has just enough power from his vehicle to get all the way back and get a rental car. Drives 8.5 hours in a rental car one way to make it to our tournament.
He was determined.
Yes, yeah, and he came and hang out with us that night to play a few games. Went to his hotel, came back, gamed into the wee hours of the night, and then drove back. Absolutely amazing effort from him to make that out. He actually ended up finishing, I believe he was third place, if memory serves. And then Tim Ubik, who's a regular in our retro scene, plays a lot of Tecmo Super Bowl, is also very good at NHL 94, ended up placing second. And we get able to get a whole bunch of this game footage captured on our live stream and then uploaded to our YouTube channel. You can find us Troy GB Land is the name of the channel. On Twitch, it's Trojan 1979. So there's some stuff on there, but really the bulk of it's on YouTube. So if anyone wants to see
LAN, right? Not LAND, right?
LAN as in local area network, correct?
You don't be looking up like GB Land as a D. So how'd you place? I know you placed.
Not terribly well. I got knocked out, I think, the second game in the bracket. So I think I won my first game in the bracket and then got bounced after that, if I remember correctly. Don't profess to be great at the game, but certainly love the heck out of it, which is why we did it.
And how many people actually showed up to play? And how many people watched?
So we had all in about 20 people that were there, about 15 actual participants. Kind of a unique thing we had a couple father-son duos, and they played, and then we give a discount to have a pairing that way. And we're hoping to grow that. We really stress on making it a family-friendly event, and the venue we chose had a big part of that. So the kids are able to get in. We even had the two kids playing each other, and we're hoping next tournament that we'll get maybe between 4 and 8 groups like that. So that'll help bolster those numbers. And but I would say overall the tournament was a big success. A lot of people like, well, this game is amazing. I can't believe you're doing that. We had all these people walking up because there was an arcade in the space behind us. Mm-hmm. So they had to kind of walk through our space to get to that. And you got a bunch of guys our age that are like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like at least a dozen different groups of people like, what is going on? This is amazing.
Yeah,
and they had other commitments. So, the buzz is high, the interest is high. And now that we threw a successful tournament on, we think that we're going to see a significant increase on who's willing to travel, and then also get additional local interest. One of the highlights of the event was the addition of poutine to the menu. So they put, which is a traditional Canadian dish. It's cheese curds and gravy and fries. And they added beef strips to the top of it. It was just amazing. It's definitely something that adds to your waistline, but helped you get into the spirit.
Well, it's almost winter time, so it's a good time to build on.
Absolutely, right? Get that insulation going.
So how many TVs and systems were you guys running this time around?
So we had some folks bring some additionals. We had somewhere around 12 or 13 systems in play, which was far more than we needed. I don't think at any time all of them were being used, but all of them were available. And then how we leveraged some of those was after the people started getting eliminated, we started popping other games in there like NBA Jam, and a couple times we hooked up a Nintendo so people could play Tecmo, Super Bowl, some Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, just a mix of things that
get something to do while they're waiting.
Well, exactly, and so when the great thing about this, when the tournament was done, we were there another 7 hours or so playing games with each other. Yeah, so it was like a full weekend of gaming, really. We already had the hall passes, as it were. Go have fun with the guys, and that's what we did.
Do you have any more tournaments coming up anytime soon?
Well, we just got done helping out the other side of the GB Land side that I do. I helped run the Tecmo Milwaukee Tecmo Super Bowl tournament this weekend, so we'll give her a little bit of a rest here. The next major retro tournament in our area that I'm aware of that's coming up is the Tundra Bowl. That's going to be a Tecmo Madison qualifier. That'll be in Green Bay. I don't have the exact date handy, but it's usually the Pro Bowl weekend, the Saturday of whatever that Pro Bowl weekend is. So probably one of the last weekends in January. Yeah. Outside of that, we're probably going to have a LAN party somewhere in there. We might do a more casual Tecmo event if we can squeeze one in. I know the Packers having a Monday night game near the end of November, and then we have the hopes of we want to see the September. We had a decent turnout, but the weather was still really nice. We're thinking it might be more advantageous to look towards maybe February, a time of the year that's fairly dead as far as events goes. Comes just before that March Madness time.
Yeah.
And the Super Bowl has concluded. So we're kind of finding that window in between. Is there an opportunity to grow this event and do it at a time when we're all just kind of sitting around waiting for the to thaw out here in Green Bay? So,
Any questions, Dash?
No, I'm pretty good.
Okay. And real quick, we can Tecmo. How did that go? Was Brad there?
Brad Bell, nope, he did not make that. It was a Tecmo Super Bowl tournament. I know Tecmo Bowl is more his.
Okay, yeah, it's forte.
Yeah, right. We did have some travelers, though. We had some guys come from Indiana as well as Iowa. I think there were at least a number of players from Illinois that came up to Milwaukee, which isn't that far of a travel, but still neat that they made that journey. And then a number of guys from the greater Green Bay area. But most of the guys that were there were from the greater Milwaukee area. Had, I think, just about 40 players, which was really nice.
That's a lot, actually.
Yeah, I hauled 16 NES consoles, and I fit between me and two other guys the same amount of TVs for each of those systems and transported them. So we got that plus streaming equipment all down there. We got down there the night before, and we had a head of blast just chilling out, playing games, testing everything out. And then the day of the tournament, so a guy by the name of Coconuts won the tournament. He also won the last Thunder Bowl. And he's also placed, not this past year, but the year before, he was the second place overall at Tecmo Madison, which is widely considered to be like the world championship of Tecmo Super Bowl. It has by far, it dwarfs every other tournament that's out there. They have over 200 players every year. They're just incredible. So he's definitely a high-end guy. He went undefeated. He destroyed, and he participated the last Tecmo Milwaukee tournament, got bounced in the bracket and didn't go undefeated. So he really upped his game. By his own admission, he hadn't been playing that much. He's been involved in school, and he kind of took some time off and went back to it and ended up just rolling everyone. So so he won something around $500 for that tournament.
Oh, wow.
And he got a trophy with a Jeremy Shockey figure.
Oh, that's cool.
The starting lineup figure was like glued to the bottom of it, and it's pretty cool.
What's pretty cool is I can see my reflection in Lord Manley's cup.
Yes,
I'm so sorry for you.
You have to send us some pictures so we can post it onto our page so people can see it.
Well, we definitely do. We have some photos posted on our
okay, yeah, we'll share that.
King of 94 page. It's on facebook.com/GBNHL94. So we have photos on there. We also have links to the different videos that we've uploaded that were captured during the stream. So and there's a nice, once you get into any of those videos, there's a nice playlist so you can go through what you want to see. Just fair warning to anyone out there, competition can get heated, so they do have some stronger language at times. It actually wasn't too bad considering, but
it's gamers.
You might hear a word or two. So I wouldn't play it at your desk at work.
So it's not safe for work, people.
Yeah, it's probably PG-13 depending on who you ask. So,
so you're talking off the show about an upcoming project you're considering. Which I talk about that.
Yep. So one of our participants and longtime internet celebrity, Moman, used to run Club Blue Radio, and he and I are really big into NHL 94, and we play constantly because he has the center ice package. Him and I went in on that, and so I'll go over there. Sometimes I'll bring my son, and we'll watch NHL games. Really whatever we want to watch, and it's literally every game, and you can even pick the language of the broadcast. Do you want the home broadcast or the away broadcast? Okay, yeah. It's really cool. So we'll go there, but then for some reason it always seems like the games are in intermission at the same time. So we'll go and we'll play NHL 94 in the other room, and we're just talking because we end up cracking jokes with each other while we're doing this, and it's side splitting at times. So we figured, well, we've got about half hour to an hour to burn every time. So when we do this, why don't we just make a concerted effort to play about an hour, put it on a live stream. It's not that we're necessarily any good at the game, but it becomes entertaining because of how we, verbally jab at each other. And so we figured we'd give that a roll. So for now, we're going to host it on my channel. If it kind of gets its own following, we may move it on to another, but for now it would be on the Trojan 1979 Twitch channel. Name unofficial, probably going to be something like Mullets on Ice. Well, hockey hair is a thing. And I don't have it, but I wear the mask. But we're thinking about the very least getting some wigs or something to kind of add to the moment, dress up in something like this where we're in a character and have fun with each other, poking, whether it's something current events while we're playing. We're kind of on polar opposites of the political scale, so we can kind of tongue-in-cheek poke fun at each other there. That also will probably have some stronger language at times added. So definitely adult viewing only, but it should be fun. And we'll, even if it's just for our own benefit, if 3 people tune in or no one tunes in, that's okay. But we're doing it for ourselves. But we figure, hey, someone out there might like this, so there it is. Mullets on ice. Let's make it happen.
On ice. And that will also be not safe for work.
Correct.
Interesting. Well, I certainly can't talk smack about men dressing up and wearing wigs.
I've heard this.
that may or may not have happened 2 episodes ago for folks that are tuning into the show late.
At least he has business in the front and part in the back with his wig.
Absolutely. Jaromir Jagr style. Best. Him and Barry Melrose, the best 2.
I would say Barry is like
in the
Barry
business.
Melrose. I love his. You might even black a few teeth out when you play. Just get the real feeling to it.
I don't. Can you? It's tough to tell because I'm in the window. If you guys can see my teeth through all these bars or not, it might
they're
work
all
out
there. So speaking of, go ahead, Dash.
No, go ahead. Where were you going to go next?
I was going to say, speaking of Genesis.
Oh yes, speaking of Genesis, and in fact, we've got some. The chat on the YouTube is pretty quiet tonight. Probably a lot of people are either voting for Trump or Hillary, either directly or by proxy through a third-party candidate. Although I'm not really sure it works that way. I think who you vote for is who you vote for. But we got some comments from Kyle, who was a previous Retro Reloader back when we had East Coast and West Coast joined together. He had some comments about the new Tectoy has announced that they are going to be releasing in June 2017 a new Sega Genesis console. And we got some details on what exactly that means. There's a lot of CNET and several other areas are giving some really vaguely worded and kind of mysterious sounding, potentially misleading sounding commentary, calling it like this is the real deal, etc. They're talking about it almost as if it's like the old console, reintroduced to the market. Folks, we have a translated version of the frequently asked questions section of the Tectoy website, where they go into incredible detail about what this new Sega Genesis console is and is not, and we're going to share that with you in incredible detail. So Kyle, his comments are, it's $100 plus. It seems a bit high for a repro system. I'm going to give my personal assessment of why I think it might have that price and whether or not I think that price is worth it. Les Barrows counters back with, if you consider that it includes a micro SD card slot and a cartridge slot, the value goes up quite a bit. I'm also going to give my take on that. Both of them wonder if it'll be possible to get one here in the States. I think with the magic of eBay and international purchasing, absolutely. Where there is a will and an American dollar, my friend, there is a FedEx truck destined for your door.
And a possible Tyler.
Yes. Tyler, we miss you.
Lizzie, we miss you.
Yes. Also, Lizzie, we miss you. I will be Lizzie temporarily as we talk about Sega Genesis.
Oh, my glasses near me.
So I can't wear these. I can't see a darn thing when I wear these.
What happened to Troy?
What is this SD card going to be used for? Is this a ROM holder or is this some sort of Game Genie replacement?
No, so the console itself is going to come with, I believe it's 22 pack-in games. And the 22 pack-in games are going to be included on the SD card. So they do mention, so it says here, well, I guess I can go through 1 through N, and then I'll go through about 1 through 6. and that'll cover this question along with others.
Okay.
And then Jeremy, you can kind of pick up from there. So one of the frequently asked questions was, can I insert more games on the micro SD card? And they answer, the games inserted into the SD card slot, the ones supplied with the Mega Drive were tested by Tectoy and verified with regards to their compatibility. And the licenses were acquired that were necessary for them to release it. It is technically possible to add content to the SD card, but do it at your own risk, basically. I'm paraphrasing. And as far as licenses, you're on your own. So it sounds like you could potentially just drop ROMs of your own acquisition, backups of your own games, right? Because everybody's being legit, I know. Yeah, you could put backups of your own games onto that SD card conceivably and attempt to play them, but it definitely looks like they're leaving the caveat of it might or might not work. And this is where I think the other details start to really paint a picture of what actually is this. So they ask, is this Mega Drive the same as the original? Mega Drive is the name of the Sega Genesis in regions outside of the US for folks, our viewers that may not know. It says no, the main components of the original Mega Drive are no longer manufactured. So this means that it's going to be some kind of derivative. They're not actually using the original CPUs, the original sound synthesizers. So then what are they using, right? The second question is kind of the same. Are the original Mega Drive components the same as the original ones? No, because they're no longer manufactured. Nobody actually makes the original chips. So the next question I think makes a lot of sense to ask, is the Mega Drive an emulator? That's what I was wondering myself. As soon as they said it takes an SD card as well as having the cartridge, the first thing that made me think was, well, if you just have cartridge only, the way the original Genesis, Nintendo, Game Gear cartridge systems of that day worked, there was a constant interaction between the system and the cartridge. As soon as you go to SD card, that seems to imply that they're just dumping the contents of the ROM somewhere in memory, and then most likely they're emulating from that point forward. That's basically how the Retron 5 does it, even though it has cartridge slots. You plug in the cartridge, it dumps the entire contents of the cartridge to memory, and then it emulates it. In terms of what the difference is at the end of the day to the user, the difference is, depending on the quality of the emulation, it may or may not be frame accurate. So the game may or may not play exactly the way that it played on the original hardware in terms of timing, movement. You might find that you're terrible at a game that you used to be excellent at, and then you go and you fire up your original Genesis on your CRT TV and you find out you're still awesome at it. There's something wrong with the reproduction of it. That's common with emulation. The Retron 5 does have that issue with certain games, Super Nintendo games especially. It plays at an off frame rate. Now
there's
the
at
upshot
least
is
like one frame of a lag on most emulation, and in the Retron it seems to be especially bad.
Yes, yeah, and it can be even worse depending on the TV. Using wireless controllers adds input lag on top of the display lag, and it can quickly become a why is this game not as fun as I remember type experience. So a lot of people think emulation versus real deal doesn't really matter. Even if you're not a purist, even if you just want to enjoy the game the way the game was meant to be enjoyed, it can impact the experience. So I think it's a legit question, you know, is it an emulator? Their response is the Mega Drive we're releasing is not an emulator. The device has a circuit that integrates components similar to the original product, since the original integrated circuits are no longer manufactured. So my interpretation of this, it's got to mean two things. If we assume that they're telling the truth and that they're not trying to be misleading, if it's truly not emulation, it's either got to be a system on a chip, which some of the things like the Super Retro Trio, the Retron 2, right, employed, the Retron 3 employed. You know, these different systems for the different consoles basically used smaller chips that were built to basically in hardware simulate, not emulate, but actually simulate what the original chips did. The main difference being if it's in hardware system on a chip, generally speaking, if there's problems with the way they reproduce the original behavior, those problems are baked into silicon. They can't be changed. You can't issue a firmware update to improve the compatibility because the chip configuration is whatever the chip configuration is. So that's one downside to system on a chip versus an emulator. You could conceivably, like Retron 5, release a series of patches to improve compatibility after the fact. So one thing that we can guess from this is most likely the compatibility they ship with day one will be the compatibility. It doesn't sound like they're going to be able to leverage the SD slot to do any kind of patching or anything like that. The other thing
I was interested to find out was the I know I saw that they had an AV only output, at least from what came out of the box, and I'm interested because on the back of the Mega Drive and the Genesis there is a the RGB is with the exception of the Model 3, which can be modified, have RGB out through that same connector, and I'm wondering if those cables will support that format. That's RGB SCART, and then you can convert that to component or HDMI through scaling to get into the HD factor. So I might be jumping the gun, but I'm interested to find out if any of that will be supported.
That's a valid question. That is in the frequently asked question. The answer to that is no. AV out is the only supported output at this particular time. So
only composite, huh?
Yep. So they only have composite. There's no component. There's no HDMI. The fact also that it's not an emulator, one remaining bit. So it could be system on a chip, but I'm guessing, and I could be totally wrong on this. This is pure speculation, but I'm guessing based on the cost of the console that they've gone with an FPGA.
Field programmable chip array. Yes.
Now the reason why, right? I mean, both system on a chip and FPGA would be doing, effectively hardware reproduction of the original Genesis equipment. But what would make the FPGA a significant difference from system on a chip is the FPGA can be software driven. And there's verbiage that they use in another answer that I'm going to get to next that seems to imply that there is some level of software running on this reproduced Genesis. So if it is in fact an FPGA.
USB AVS, it sounds something like that.
What was that?
Retro USB AVS console is using those kind of chips.
That's correct. Now, the main difference, the significant difference, and why this would be important is that with FPGA, if they do in fact have software that they're able to load at boot time that configures the FPGA, it is entirely possible that they could issue updates for the SD card that could change the behavior and the configuration of the FPGA to allow it to expand its support after launch.
That would be pretty cool.
So that would actually be pretty cool. You'd get the performance and you would get the benefits of having it all be hardware based. But then you could also have the benefits of being able to update the software to improve the compatibility down the line, which does look like it's going to be an issue for them because the very next question, number 4, was does the Mega Drive run all game cartridges? They say no. The Mega Drive runs most cartridges of the original console, but some cartridges may not work because of the differences from the original hardware and software. So
system on a chip again.
Yeah, either system on a chip or a as yet unfinished FPGA configuration. Right?
And as I understand, FPGAs are supposed to be able to handle the things like, in the SNES world, the Mario RPGs and things like that, or the Castlevania 3, on the Super. I apologize. I'm not a mega collector, but I understand
that's totally okay. Both the system on a chips and the FPGAs can do it. For example, do I have it here? I do not have it here on my person right now, but the Retro Duo Portable, which plays Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Sega Genesis through an adapter, is system on a chip, and they used a custom system on a chip. There's a generic, I think one company, I think it might have been AT Games, developed a system on a chip, and largely a lot of the other clone consoles license that chip and just use it verbatim in their own clone consoles.
Do we lose Jeremy, by the way?
We might have. I think Jeremy's running off to check the election results. So he might have heard that that Hillary's winning California and run off to like take care of some stuff.
Sorry about that. I heard someone outside my house.
Oh, okay.
Check.
We thought maybe you caught some bad election results and ran off to correct things.
Not yet. We'll see.
Gotcha. You're not staking out the polling centers, are you?
Maybe earlier. No
Making sure there's no rigged elections.
Exactly. Do my civic duty.
Yeah. So back on topic though, the Retro Duo Portable has a system on a chip where they started out with a licensed SoC and then they actually made their own modifications to fix and enable games like Super Mario RPG and Castlevania.
That's great. I hope those start making their way into like the Gamers Tech and Retron consoles that we're seeing out there that are still analog based, which I do like that as an option. I'm waiting for something that's going to put out both outputs. That has some sort of analog conversion, but you still have the raw digital. I know it's going to add some dollars, but I'd rather have one solution that can do both without having to get adapters involved and then more additional or added layers of lag and processing.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would happily spend it. It costs just a bit on that. It costs like roughly $1 to $2 extra per console. So I mean, when they're cranking these out at scale, yeah, it's an extra like if they kick out 1 million units, it's an extra $1 to $2 million. But at the same time, like me as the customer, dude, if you're gonna charge me $120 for a console that can only do HDMI, I will pay the extra $5 to also have it do component or S-video or composite.
Exactly.
So I'm totally with you on that. And like you said, like I'd rather have it built in. Yes, I can get adapters and everything, but don't give me, especially if it's an emulator-based one, don't give me a console that adds lag that wasn't there in the first place, and then my only option to play it on the original hardware, like a CRT or something, is to introduce more lag.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's a non-starter. So I do like that this console is going to output directly to AV. So if you're trying to take the Genesis, the new Genesis from Tectoy, and plug it into a normal television, it's going to look the way that you would expect it to look. I would imagine that the lag is going to be minimized because you're not going through any kind of conversion. So some other really interesting ones. So that they say, will Tectoy relaunch cartridges for the Mega Drive? Right now they say, so far they don't know for sure. Tectoy would like to launch new old cartridges, but for that we need to negotiate the licenses, and this can be pretty complex in the case of many of the games and brands that were created decades ago by companies no longer in business. Right?
I'd be interested to know with this, some games not working. That makes me think that the flash cards aren't going to work, which is probably a big appeal having a modern console like this. However, if we can get the flash drive to get those ROMs to work, that's where I think this becomes a good value, because a flash card's about $100 to $150 depending on the flavor you get. A decent used console with an old controller is going to be probably $35-$40 depending on where you get it from. If you have something that's brand shiny new, works with most of your actual cartridges, plus if you feel like doing that, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah, and I would say so I'm pretty confident that in one of the other answers that they give, I'm pretty confident they don't come out and say flash cards won't work, but based on the other things that they say that we'll get to a little bit later that doesn't work, I'm going to put out there, I am 99% confident that flash cards will not work on this, which was probably why they added the SD card slot.
Love it.
Now, the thing about that is, is this emulation, is this system on chip, is this FPGA? I think we can't necessarily judge based on flash card support because, as you mentioned, each one of these implementations has had problems. A faulty FPGA, loader could make it so that you can't load a flash card. A system on a chip not designed in the right way, or even just the absence of a single pin because maybe only flash cards are what use it, can cause it to not work. But I'm 100% confident that regardless of how they've implemented it, flashcards are not going to work. So they do say, can I insert more games onto the SD card? We already talked about that. The last bit that I'm going to talk about, and then Jeremy, I'll let you kind of take up some of these other ones. They say, is it possible to save games? And by this, they mean save states. This is what makes me think it's either system on a chip or FPGA. They say, no, it is only possible to save the game if the original cartridge has a save function.
That's disappointing.
Right. Now, if this was emulation, it would be such an easy feature for save state that it'd be a no-brainer. So the fact that it's not there, right, leads me to believe it's got to be. It leans me more to the system on a chip than an FPGA, because with FPGA you should conceivably be able to get access to all the information that you need to dump the state of the CPU and rebuild that state the next time you launch a title. However, with system on a chip, you would not be able to do that. Basically, every time you cycle the power, the chip would return to the original state, and there'd be no way to prime it to the exact state that you wanted it in. So in this case, I'm leaning more toward it might be. Price has me saying it could be FPGA because that would certainly justify the price. But feature-wise, it has me leaning toward it's probably going to be a system on a chip. So, Jeremy, you want to pick up on, they talk about HDMI and then a couple of the other things?
Why Mega Drive does not have HDMI? It says, the vast majority of TVs on sale in the Brazilian market have composite video input RCA compatible with the Mega Drive output. Adding the HDMI output to the console would raise the final price of the product to the consumer without increasing the original resolution.
Yeah, so it does, that's important. They don't do any up conversion whatsoever. So they're outputting the original resolution that these games were designed to display at. That on the one hand, that means you're not going to get sexy filters with smoothing and fake interlacing and all that other stuff. On the bright side, it means you're not going to get any lag associated with all this extra post-processing happening to the image, especially if you're going to play it on a CRT anyway. Another thing, too, that was in there that I failed to mention earlier, right now Tectoy is talking about launching this in Brazil. So if you want one of these, you would have to do the whole order it on eBay internationally, have it shipped to your house. There's no current plans that they have announced to ship outside of Brazil.
Oh.
I remember, didn't that outsell the PS4, like the Genesis, as far as like they're still selling? They're so far back because of import fees with those other consoles that.
Yes. Import fees are incredibly ridiculous. For example, it could cost them up to like an additional $150 to acquire a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So, which is why actually, and this was the case back in the day, even Nintendo and Sega didn't generally release their consoles directly in those countries. There was another company in those countries that was licensed to produce and release those consoles and games locally. A lot of the Sega Master System games, for example, that originally came out in Brazil were produced by, I think it was actually Tectoy. And the main reason for that was it was a way for them to avoid the huge import fees, was just to produce them and release them locally. So number 9.
Comes with how many controllers? Can you buy additional controllers? The product includes a 3-button core joystick in its original size. You can buy extra joysticks through the official website.
So this is cool. Now, so we are gonna have new stock, not new old stock. We're gonna actually have new stock of 3-button Genesis controllers. I think that's really neat because some of those controllers really have not held up to age very well.
Yeah, mine aren't doing very well right now either.
What about the 6-button? Because that's I'm a Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat guy, and definitely that's what I try to lock down are the 6-button options.
Yeah, they haven't
Sounds
mentioned
Yeah.
whether or not they're going to release 6-button controllers directly. I would imagine if it does well, they're probably leaving the door open for that. They haven't mentioned either way, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're starting out with 3 buttons because I know most of the games are going to support that. That's what a lot of the folks are going to remember, except for folks that came in like during the last half of the Genesis life cycle. But they do mention that original controllers are compatible with the Genesis, so you can bring your existing 6-button controllers along for the ride if you'd like to.
Excellent.
So,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun. That was number 10, Jeremy.
That's fine.
Give him the official skinny.
Yes,
taking the
as
mask
long
off,
as
I
that's
can't
the
take it
original.
Ah!
Oh my goodness! What the hell?
has a little
What happened to Troy?
Oh, that one's a lot tighter than the Packer mask. I might have to go with the mullet. I can tolerate that longer than the mask.
So Jeremy, this one is the bombshell one that really seems to point to system on a chip.
Yes, it says, due to accessories such as Game Genie, Sega CD, Power Base Converter, 32X, Activator, Mega Mouse, and multitask work on a new Mega Drive? No. So that's sad.
That is very sad. Now, what'll be interesting is if they have some kind of like Hyperkin introduced in software, an additional layer, and a lot of flash drives introduced the ability to have Game Genie support or cheat code support. So nobody's asked the question: are they going to have their own built-in cheats mechanism? Yes or no? I don't know. I can't even really speculate on that without knowing enough about the underneath build. But yeah, out of box, your Game Genie, because the Game Genie doesn't work, and that's about the simplest add-on, or the Power Base Converter for that matter. Power Base Converter basically means that whether it's system on a chip or FPGA, they didn't implement the Sega Master System instruction set. So the Sega Genesis, the original Sega Genesis, actually had the ability to process the Master System instruction set. I don't remember if it was through the existing CPU as a subset or if it was an actual separate chip on the board. But basically, the Power Base Converter for the Sega Genesis, as big as it was, really all it was literally a pin pass-through and remap, so that when you plugged in a cartridge, it just remapped the pins to something that matched up with the Genesis pins, and then there was a processor inside the Genesis that actually knew how to run the old Master System games. So that hardware is notably absent. And I'm noticing that they're not using verbiage like "not initially, but maybe in the future," all this other stuff. Like they're being very. This is a translation, but even the translation. Everything throughout the translation seems consistent. There's never any indication that the compatibility is intended to change over the life of the console, which to me would lead away from FPGA solidly to that system on a chip. So it sounds like whatever's baked in is baked in, and they've got some clear limitations baked in.
Okay, does the Mega Drive work on LCD, LED, plasma screens? Yes, as long as the TV has AV inputs.
Which is basically every TV in existence today. So,
Well, I don't know if you bought an HDTV in the recent years. Most of them do not have analog inputs of any kind. They're even doing away with component. I'm seeing a couple HDMI ports and your coaxial back for like a cable box or antenna. That's about all I'm saying. And unless, there are TVs that still have them, but they're harder to find.
Some of them are doing the 3.5-inch jack that plugs in and then breaks out into the others, but it'll look like a little headphone jack on the back.
Interesting.
So
last couple I bought didn't have anything on there. Now these are sub $1,000 TVs. These are like $600 and less. So I don't know what the. Yeah, these are cheap Walmart specials.
Yeah. So let's see. The number 13 is kind of a silly one. How do I configure the TV format on the TV so it does not distort the image? Set the TV to 4.3 aspect ratio. So it's pretty straightforward.
Okay, what is the resolution of the video output of the new Mega Drive? The resolution is equal to the original, 320 by 240 pixel.
Yep. So upshot is you're not going to get lag due to image processing. Downshot is obviously it's not going to look as sexy as it might look on, say, a Retron 5 with some filters. I would prefer the no lag. I'm going to play it on a CRT anyway, so I'm going to see it the way that it was intended to be seen.
So the video quality is really not related to resolution, even in a Retron world, because that's a 3 times with the 720p is a 3 times integer of the original output of 240p. What reason it doesn't look good? It has to do with the all the noise that's in between that, all of that audio, that sync, the lumens, everything coming off that single cable, with an RF and then composite, just crap in the way. So the image doesn't really change per se. If you were to look at, let's say, an RGB SCART TV, it looks it will look very similar to what the Retron 5 does. Very, very close. If your TV supported RGB with no, up converting or whatever. So, but that's what really the core. The resolution isn't as critical. It's really that just crap cable solution that we were stuck with in the United States for all those years, and to us that looks normal, and that's what we kind of gravitate towards. But it's actually pretty crappy. There's some really sharp pixels out there on a lot of these games. When you play on an emulator, that's actually how it's supposed to look. There wasn't anything with the emulator that made it fancy. That's really what it was supposed to look. And then
it largely depends on the game, though, right? Because, for example, the H2QX filter, right, is doing specific kind of aliasing, and it's doing a specific kind of blur to smooth out some of those pixels, depending on the filters that you use in some of the emulators.
Oh, I'm sorry. To clarify, I always use the standard, no extras.
Yeah. That's mainly what I was referring to. Is on the on the Retron 5. There's lots of different filters that you use the right filters. Super Mario 3 looks like a cel shaded like Disney animation, and the Goombas have all nice soft rounded edges and everything. Yeah. So you can put in the fake interlacing, which basically just cuts half the detail out of the original. But you're right. If you go to the pure pixel view, right, in an emulator or the Retron 5, you're seeing it how the pixel artists actually saw it when they were working on it, in the studio, or when Craig Stitt, right, our friend from Sega, was working on the Sega digitizers for Hidden Palace Zone. That's what he saw when you played in an emulator. When you play it on the TV, you're seeing kind of like the TV's bastardized version of their original vision.
You guys remember the black box Nintendo games?
What was that?
The black box Nintendo games. A lot of the original releases, like Kid Icarus and Excite Bike, and like you look at the box art for those games, and you've got these Metroid's another great example. These big, blocky, colorful, bright. This looks awesome.
Yeah.
And then you play on the TV, and it's like,
what is this?
And I had freaking RF, as a kid, and we didn't have TVs I had one of these giant console TVs. Composite wasn't in my world until I no longer played Nintendo for, I was on to the next thing or whatever. So that was something that it was always a big disappointment. And then when I learned that it could actually look like that, when I discovered emulation, and then I stumbled on the My Life in Gaming channel. They had some really interesting. They have their RGB masterclass. It's incredible what kind of quality you can get out of original hardware, especially the Genesis.
I was going to bring up a box so I could kind of show what you were talking about, but apparently I grabbed a bad example. Blaster Master.
Still a great game.
Blaster Master. Yeah, they gave you the pixel art, but they gave you the pixel art as seen through the TV screen, right?
Yeah.
So you can see they added the aliasing, they added the noise and the crappiness and all that other. So at least Blaster Master showed you what you were gonna see, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was no disconnect between a perfectly pixelated Jason and then a noisy, fuzzy, pixelated Jason. So they have
Well, guys,
another.
before you continue, I apologize. I'm going to have to sign out. Appreciate you having me on. Gonna move on to my bedtime routine, but thank you so much for having me on, and I hope to do this again soon.
All right.
Thank you, Troy.
Thank you so much.
Take care, Troy.
Catch you on the flip side.
Catch you later. So they did ask his earlier question, is the new Mega Drive capable of outputting video in the RGB standard with the correct cables? The answer is no. Can I use my headphones? The answer to that one, surprisingly, is
yes.
Yes. Is the output stereo or mono?
Stereo.
Stereo. Many emulated solutions have trouble reproducing accurately the sounds of the original Mega Drive. How does the new console intend to play the original console audio? They said the Mega Drive plays the audio through similar components, so the result will not be 100% the same as the original. So I think the fact that sounds contradictory is probably due to translation. But basically what they're trying to say is it doesn't use the exact same components. It's using components that are attempting to be like the original. So is the Mega Drive, is it bivolt? They say yes. Apparently this is a big deal there. The product has an internal 110, 220 volt power supply. So if that's important to you, I think that's basically whether or not it can be used outside Brazil. So it sounds like the answer is yes. Warranty period is 90 days from the original day of purchase. They ask, does the Mega Drive run games with special chips like Virtual Racing and Sonic and Knuckles? No. So now what is interesting is whether or not Sonic and Knuckles itself plays, or if they're just referring to the games that stack into it. Also worth wonder is if you were to take that game or an IPS patched version of the game, like say you took Sonic and Knuckles, did the IP patch to make it Sonic and 3 and Knuckles, and you loaded that on the SD card, would that work? So because what could be happening here is, remember, if you're talking about plugging the cartridge in and the first thing it's going to do is dump the cartridge into memory, then it makes sense that whatever the first thing is that the dumper sees, that's going to be what gets dumped into memory, right?
Yes.
So and generally speaking, the way that some of the Sonic and Knuckles, the way that the additional games work is that there's actually a trick that they use that when the game launches, there's code within the game that allows it to see that there's another game in what would be normally non-available space. So after the fact, because the Genesis, the original Genesis, is fully interacting with the hardware, with the cartridge in the slot, it can boot the initial game, and then based on reading code from the initial game, it can pull additional data from the cartridge from wherever it needs to. With a solution where you're dumping the cartridge into memory and then executing what's in memory, largely the cartridge in the slot after the initial memory dump is being ignored.
Yeah.
So, and you can actually see this with the Retron 5. If you plug in, if you use the original Nintendo Game Genie, you can actually plug in a Nintendo cartridge with the Game Genie into the slot. It will not recognize the Game Genie, but it will pass through and see the original NES game and actually dump that NES game. Now, if you launch the NES game on the Retron 5 and pull the game out of the Game Genie, but leave the Game Genie in the cartridge slot,
It'll keep playing.
It will keep playing the game because the only thing the Retron 5 is actually doing after the ROM dump is just checking to make sure that there's continuity, that there's electrical continuity. It's just checking to make sure that there's still a cartridge in the slot. So, so that said, you know, I think that their system on a chip or their FPGA, however they've implemented it, is doing probably similar to the Retron 5. It's just dumping the ROM into memory one time, and then after that, it probably doesn't actually care what's in the cartridge slot. So anything that's based on lock-on technology is not going to work. Anything that piggybacks like a Game Shark, a Pro Action Replay, Game Genie, not going to work. Now, whether or not it works through SD card, though, I expect there shouldn't be any reason, as long as it's a single ROM that it can load once, and as long as it's using instructions that they've properly replicated in their system on a chip, the game should work. So, but then certain things like virtual racing, I would definitely expect that virtual racing would not work, because that used a chip, a DSP chip, similar to the Super Effects.
Yeah.
So if they have not implemented that in their system on a chip or their FPGA, then those games will certainly not work.
That's why I'm saying not all games are going to work.
Exactly. They're bracing people for it. But I'm noticing they're not saying that the cartridge won't work, but the ROM will work. Right? So I think that they're kind of bracing people for, expect it's not going to work.
Yeah. Soon the worst, hope the best.
Yes. So, which I think is definitely a better line to toe than the line that Hyperkin tried to toe, where they were saying 100% compatibility, 100% compatibility, and then they release, and like Mega Man doesn't work.
That's one of those ones you think will work.
How the hell? I mean, it works now, right? They issued a series of patch out. They were very diligent. They issued a series of patches and updates. They did an incredibly good job, keeping up with that. But still, at launch, you're just kind of scratching your head, going, "How?"
That's not the. I mean, one thing was some obscure game, but Mega Man.
Right. So at least Tectoy is being upfront. They're saying, look, not everything's going to work. Yes, you can try to load stuff in the side through SD, and it may or may not work. Try it at your own risk. The games that they put on there, they know are going to work. But other games, it's your own deal. So the last thing that was available on the FAQ was what will the packaging look like. They say that the packaging is going to be based on the original with some changes. And most notably, they're not going to use styrofoam. They're going to probably use some kind of like cardboard or other biodegradable form. But that is kind of neat. So if you are a collector and you want, you don't mind that it's a clone system, you don't mind that the compatibility is not going to be 100%, you can't use this to plug into your Sega CD, you can't use your 32X or any of that initial stuff. If you don't care about that, you just kind of want something that's going to look good on the shelf. This might be a good opportunity, if nothing else, to get a functional console to run some of the more common games. A good way to get replacement new stock controllers, legit controllers. Yep.
Hopefully good quality.
Yeah, hopefully they're good. They're good quality. We'll have to see. If hopefully they're not clicky button controllers. Hopefully they're still using reactive pads like the original games controllers used. But folks, there you have it. So all the details that we currently have available from Brazil, from Tectoy. So is the Genesis as we know it making a comeback? I'd say not exactly. This should be basically this might become the ultimate Genesis clone console. I'll give them that. Like if it's got the headphone port and that works, and the game compatibility is mostly there, and the ability to sideload ROMs is like an added benefit, and there's no lag. This could turn out to be one hell of a Genesis clone console, but at best it's going to be just that, one hell of a Genesis clone console. This is not a resurrection of the original Sega Genesis as we knew it, as we had it. So if your Genesis right now is dead and you've got a power-based converter and a 32X waiting for a new Genesis to breathe new life back into them, this is not going to be that console. If you remember fondly the days of Sonic the Hedgehog, Streets of Rage, etc., and you just want to be able to enjoy those on a CRT television with a controller, that you remember, it sounds like it'll fit that bill just nicely.
Exactly.
So, Jeremy, do you have anything to add?
Well, thank you to Troy for coming on tonight.
Yep, thanks to Troy for coming out tonight. I hope that he sleeps well and wakes up to the candidate of his choosing in office. So, folks, for the rest of you, If you missed our show because you're watching the election,
Shame.
for shame, for shame. You gave your vote away if you watched our show, or if yeah.
What's more important, the future of America or our views? The answer is our views, obviously.
The answer is our views, right? Our
like
views.
we need our pennies from YouTube.
That's exactly right. Like if we get 1,000 viewers, then we get $5 in ad revenue. I don't even know if that's the math. I just made that up on the spot.
So far, we've made about 3 pennies off the show, so we're doing pretty good for ourselves.
Yes, we have this year. I think we've made like 3 cents this year, which is amazing. That's
so let's double it next year. 6 cents next year.
Absolutely, next year 6 cents in 2016. So until then, folks, we were gonna cover pickups, but I think it's a little too late for that. So we can cover pickups next week. We know that most folks probably want to get back to the election, the train wreck. Don't want to stare but can't look away.
I'm gonna watch the whole show.
So, folks, have a good week. We hope that your candidate wins. If not, then we hope that you have good sedatives. So, good night.